Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Xavier. So we're in London today. We're going to ask some people whether the British Museum should consider returning the objects that originally came from other countries to those countries. Okay, so let's get into it. In the video, I challenge interviewees from both sides, so it doesn't matter if their opinion is yes or no. I will ask them further questions, and many of the questions don't necessarily represent my personal views. But if you would ask me about my personal view, I would say yes, they should return many of the objects if they can trace back their origin and ensure their safekeeping and display. However, I also understand that it's a very complex issue with many of the items in the museum. Do you think the British Museum should return all of the objects that they acquired from other countries? Because when you visit the British Museum, you see a lot of objects from Africa, from Asia, from many different parts of the world, right? Do you think they should return these objects to the original countries?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you got to think that no one's making money off them in the British Museum. They're there for the public to see. But then again, they should probably be returned to wherever they came from. I think it's only fair, isn't it?
But don't you think that the British Museum has kept a lot of these objects safe for a very long period of time?
Yeah, it has. But I think now the world's at a place where they'd be safe where they came from. So that's, yeah, they've done a good job keeping them safe. But I'm sure they'd be safe if they went somewhere else.
It's not a simple question with lots of nuance. So I'm not an expert in this field whatsoever. I would say each object tells its own story, and there's certain objects that certainly should belong with where it came from, whereas others, if people are happy for them to be in a museum, then that's okay as well. Yes, certain objects, certainly, as long as they're not going. I think it's good that they're on public display. You don't want them to go to somewhere where they're then hidden in somebody's private possessions. But yeah, each object, it'll just depend on the objects and the relationship with the country and what they're going to do with it and that kind of thing. But definitely, I'm not one to say we should hoard everything and not give it back.
It's all been, taken from all the countries that they are now displaying, and it just feels like it doesn't feel authentic. So I literally just have been recently to the British Museum, and I had a look at all the Chinese and Indian artifacts there, and it just doesn't feel comfortable watching them and looking at them because I feel like they're not in the place they're supposed to be. So it would feel more authentic to actually go to the place, like, for example, China or India, and actually see them where they're supposed to be. Yeah.
But don't you think that the museum has kept a lot of these artifacts safe for a very long time?
Yes. But again, what are they keeping them safe from?
I mean, today's world is a little bit different, right? It's a lot more peaceful than 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say, because a lot of people come to the British Museum to see these items. They were part of the colonies, most of them. I do think that they were stolen, though. A lot of these that are controversial. So it's a very good question. It's a tricky question.
But for example, if these countries also have the capability to take care of these objects now, and they can also showcase to the public for free, what do you think about that? Like, do you think some of these objects can be returned?
I think some of them could be some of them, yeah. I think if they have the capability to house them and protect them, then yeah, I think maybe they should be returned. What do you think?
Well, I agree with the last statement that you made. I think, if the country has the capability of taking care of them, it's safe, generally a safe country, and they have tourists that come over to visit and stuff, and they will display for public interest. I think, why not, right?
How many tourists are you stealing from Britain, though? I mean, it doesn't. I'm not British, so I'm American, so we're here on vacation.
No, they're also stealing tourists from other countries.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think the UK has a lot of tourists anyway, and they have a lot of things to show people.
Like I said, we have not been to the British Museum yet, but I do plan on going on this trip to see it. And that was one of the things. I want to see some of these items that are controversial. in this regards to. So yeah, it's.
So you might get like different perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen them, so I can't really say yes or no. I'm kind of right in there in the middle. So
Yeah.
Yes, short answer, yes. I think there's a very complicated history behind that, and obviously colonialism and what it's done to the rest of the world has had tremendous impact. And so I guess, yeah, short answer is yes. Long answer is, yeah, I don't really know what more to say.
I guess it depends on the artifact, and it depends on the history behind it, and whether or not that country also shows willingness to get it back. And there's so many different things, but the short answer is definitely yes, right? ¿Pensáis que el Museo Británico debería devolver los objetos que ha obtenido de otros países, ¿no? De donde vienen los objetos. ¿El Museo Británico debería devolverlos?
Igual ella tiene una opinión más formada que yo.
No lo sé. Creo que en parte sí, creo que en parte es más sencillo, o sea, como ver los objetos en el contexto en el que deberían estar. Entonces creo que sí que sería más lógico devolver los objetos. Entiendo que históricamente, pues al final para ellos ha sido una conquista y una victoria, entonces como que es el orgullo de poder tenerlos porque los han ganado hasta cierto punto, pero bueno, no estoy del todo de acuerdo y creo que sí que es verdad que es más, pues sí, como más lógico el poder ver los objetos en el país de origen y poder relacionarlos con la cultura y con cómo han afectado a la cultura de hoy en día en ese país.
In principle, yes, they belong to other countries. I think they need to talk to other countries to make sure they're well cared for when they get back to other countries and give them advice on how to do it. But in principle, yes, they should go back. And as I was saying, they should go back if their safety can be guaranteed. And maybe the museum should advise on how they should do it. But until that safety can be guaranteed, I think they should be kept in, what's the word? Kept in safety for the whole world.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, one of the arguments to not do it is the British Museum would probably think, oh, we can take good care of them and preserve them and protect them for future generations. But the British Museum could probably also help those other countries set up systems and facilities where they can preserve them themselves. And then people would have more reason to go to those countries and learn about the history of those countries in those places. So yeah, I think long term that would be a good thing. Yeah.
But don't you think that the British Museum has kept a lot of these objects safe for a very long time, so they kind of have a right to keep them? Or what do you think?
Yes, but I don't know. I don't think the right to keep it really comes into it that much, because if the British Museum gives them away and then the original countries keep them for a long time, then you could also say they then have a right to keep them. So the right to keep them changes over time. Unfortunately, that's also the way with sort of power in countries like monarchies, etc. It's like they have a right to rule over us because they're the kings, but they're only the kings and queens because in the past their family won the war or whatever. So yeah, everything's a bit transient.
Wherever the artifact came from, I think that country should have a say-so, and that they should vote on what they think, and then they should let the items go like that, so that it's fair, and no one is saying we're better than you, and it's just by a random poll.
Okay. Do you think the British Museum should consider returning a lot of the objects or artifacts that they got from other countries to these countries, to the countries of origin? This is a very tricky question, I know, but what's your thought on it? Because a lot of the countries are safe nowadays, right? So it's not like 200 years ago or 50 years ago, right? So what's your thought on it?
Well, I think if people express a want for things to be returned, that should be considered. And why not? I mean, you can always make replicas to have in the British Museum, and to me a replica is as good as a real thing, and you've actually been very altruistic by giving the thing back to somebody who it means a lot to. It may not mean an awful lot to us, but somebody, it's something tribal perhaps that goes back 200 or 300 years, very important to them in their heart, say, So yes, yeah, it's not a bad thing. Not a bad thing.
That's a very interesting perspective on it.
It's a difficult one because I think it teaches sort of people in Britain a lot about the history of like the world. Yeah. But I can see your point where it should be sort of, you know, other countries have a right to artifacts from their hometown, you know, from their countries. So it's a bit of a sticky question, really, because I guess other countries, they have a piece of Britain as well, like in their museums. So I guess it's only fair that we all get a share.
Oh, I'm not from those countries. If I was from those countries, it'd probably bother me, but I'm not from those countries. I just look at the artifacts, so me it doesn't bother me, but I'm not from those countries.
Okay. But do you think like they should do that though for these other countries?
Probably.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, if it wasn't theirs to begin with, I think it's just sort of one of those things that just because it happened so long ago doesn't mean that because they've owned it for so long or had it for so long doesn't mean that they own it. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
So why do you think they still keep these objects?
Probably because just no one really, when it's been there, no one's really like, oh, this maybe doesn't belong here, or people just, I suppose, turn a blind eye to it, or actually just genuinely just don't think about it, because it's just, been there for so long, so no one even really thinks. But yes, to answer your question, it's probably your easiest question yet.
This is the easiest one? Okay, all right. So how do you feel when you see all these objects from, you know, other countries, exotic countries in the British Museum? Do you feel bad about it, or how do you feel about it?
I suppose it's interesting because, again, obviously coming from Ireland, there's obviously a very complicated relationship between Ireland and Britain. So I think if I saw Irish things there, I would be very, I suppose, offended may be the wrong word, but
mixed feelings.
Yeah, versus I probably to other countries would turn a blind eye because it doesn't, I suppose, affect me personally. But whenever I think about it like objectively as a whole, it makes sense. But I suppose if I was imagining something from Ireland there, I would think, it does obviously belong there. So I think from seeing things myself, I probably might turn a blind eye to it because I don't suppose I wouldn't really think about ultimately where it comes from. But I mean, objectively, I think, it probably should go back.
Because it's not something that people really think about these days, right?
Yeah, and I suppose when things are in museums, you just kind of see it in a museum and you don't really question it. But obviously, if I saw something from Ireland, I would be like, that's weird that that's here. So yeah, yeah.
I think it's probably one of those things where you have to take it like each artifact case by case. And it's kind of, with some of them, I think it's tricky to ascertain the exact origins. Yeah. So it's like, if you were giving it back to someone, you need to know who they're giving it back to. But if it's an obvious, it should be giving it back to a specific country or whatever body of people, then they should probably go back.
If that country can keep the objects safely, right? Only.
If that country will, I don't know, keep them displayed to the public of their region, then it should return to the point of origin. Yeah. Like I said, I think you've got to look at each artifact as it comes. But if the place of origin has good reason and really wants it back and can look after them in the same way, then it should probably go back.